Okay, guys, I just want to have a look at this question here in the Digital Ambition Circle community, where Alexander was wondering how you could take a content section alpha from frames with ACSS and have it so that it alternates these lines going down. Now, my first thought was, why would you alternate a section? Doesn't make sense to me to have a section and another section, another section for your content like this. What makes more sense is a list, so an unordered list, and then these would be list items. Now, with frames, the later frames built by Kevin and his boys do exactly that. So the way they're currently constructed is a little bit different to how they used to be constructed. I think they keep finding better ways and improving on how they do things. I like the way that it's currently being done, so I'm going to look at exactly doing that. So instead of using a section and alternating this section, what we're going to do is look at an existing frame which already does this, and look at how we can style it and use it in a similar way. My go-to with frames is the reason I use frames, and the reason pretty much anyone uses frames, is for productivity. It's for speed of throwing content onto the editor. Most of what you need to do is already done. All you need to do is change some of the parameters, change some of the CSS, add some properties to it, and away you go. So the idea is to make things more manageable, not less manageable. So let's go with what already has been set up, ready to go. So if we look at frames, I've got a very empty editor at the moment. And if I look at my templates, go to remote templates, I've already got frames installed. So the section that Alexander was using is content section alpha. Ooh, helps if I spell. Content section alpha, which is this here. And if you look at that content section, it is just a section with an inner content wrapper and an image. Okay, so there's no ULs, there's no lists, there's no ordering or flipping. It's just a straight section, and if you put a loop on that, all you're going to do is end up with a bunch of sections that are not accessible because they're not a list, so the screen readers don't know that it's a list of things, and it's just harder to manage. So we're not going to use this. We're going to use something different. If we have a look at the templates again, I'm just going to do a search quite broadly here in the templates, just type in the word section. And this is what you kind of do. You look through and go, okay, so I want a section. And that's really what we're looking at here. We're looking at a section that has a UL, and then it's got some LIs, which has got our content, and that's what we're really looking for. So looking in here, we've got some here. Okay, what I'm finding, these alpha ones are done a little bit different. I haven't actually particularly looked at this one here, but the alpha ones were done a little bit differently to what the current versions are, and that's just through, I guess, continuous improvement. So if you look at, say, for example, like this article section India, you most likely find that that is not divs, it is a UL with LIs set up correctly, okay? Or it could be just a simple grid on a LI, depending on how that's been done. All right, now if we go further down, I'm going to look further down here to see if I can see anything that looks similar to like what I'm trying to achieve here. And what I find, I've already looked at this, so I know there is. So looking at this one here, the feature section delta, what I'm seeing is an image on the left and some content on the right. On the next row, it's the opposite. Exactly what I'm looking for here. Not exact layout, but exactly the same concept. So if I pick that feature section delta and insert that, I've already started my part of my process to getting this done. So just get rid of the things we don't want. So this whole intro section up here, that's done. Let's get rid of the, just going to collapse everything, open. Let's get rid of the second, the third and the fourth of these, because we really only want to look at getting the first two right, and then we're going to turn it into a loop on the first one. So having a look at how these are being constructed, it's very different to that card we just looked at. So we have a single section, right? And on that section, we've got a class, and on that class, we've got a container gap, and that's just so our titles and additional things we're putting in the container or in that section are going to have some spacing. It's not important for this grid, so let's just not even worry about that just yet. In the style tab, we've got nothing there, nothing set. You can see there's no yellow dots here. So there's been really nothing except for our container gap for the content. All right, and that's it. Now our grid is where all the hard work happens. And what we've got on this grid here is there's a hint. I'm looking at the structure panel that Kevin's put here, which is a UL. And I'm assuming Kevin, could be someone else doing this in his team, but I'll just say Kevin. We're gonna have a look here. We've got a hint there that we've actually made that a UL. We've made this an LI. Okay, another thing that Kevin often does with these, which I haven't seen on this one, is add CSS in brackets if there's CSS on this element. And quite often now, I mean, this one's even different to some of the newer ones, where there will only be one of these with CSS. The CSS for these additional levels here will all be on this one element. In this particular case, the CSS has been put on in both places, but that's pretty much how it would work. Okay, so let's have a look at this feature grid UL here. And in the settings panel, we've got our custom HTML tag set to UL. And that's pretty much the only thing that's set on the content. Okay. In fact, we haven't even selected the class. These settings are, some of these are a little weird, like whether you select the class or not, these are the same. So it doesn't really matter. In fact, I don't think these get stored on the class, these settings here. The justify settings, the align settings do. I think grid template concept, but this section up here, I think they're actually stored on the actual ID on the element, not on the class. Doesn't matter anyway. So all we need to know is that what we've got is a UL at our top level here, and that is our feature grid delta. And then if we look at the style tab, the only dot here we've got is CSS, and we've got some CSS there. Okay, let's have a look at our LI. So on our LI, the first LI, same deal. If we go to our content, we've changed our custom HTML tag to be an LI. So now we've got an unordered list with list items, which each of these rows is a list item. And that's all there is to that layout there. And then on the style tab, while we've got delta selected, we've got some CSS for that LI, which is the layout of that card. So the UL is for laying out the LIs, so it's giving us our content gap between these on a grid, and the LIs are giving us our layout of that card. Okay, that's the difference between the two. All right, now let's go back to how this actually works. If we look at one of these LIs, we've got a media, is that a div? It's a block, we've got a media block and a content block. And on the feature card here, we've got a media and a content. But when we look at this visually on the screen, we've got content on the left, media on the right, media on the left, content on the right. So that's being flipped, even though we've got the same layout, which is exactly what we need for a loop. Because when we create our loop, we're going to delete the second one, we're going to loop on the first one, and we want this to automatically happen. All right, so that's where understanding which cards to use, how to use them makes more sense. So if we go back to our feature grid UL here and have a look at the CSS on that, it's a grid. Set our UL to a grid. Just our template columns is one frame across, and each column occupies one frame. And we just got a container gap. The container gap is this gap between the LIs. You can set that to whatever you like. My tip on this would, do not edit these classes. Unless you've decided that you're going to use this in multiple places on the website and they're all going to have exactly the same spacing and styling, everything, don't edit the classes. Create modifiers. I would say leave frames as they were. That's my preference. And just create your own classes to modify it. And I'll come back to that. So we then have a media query. So anything from a minimum width of 768 and upwards, we're going to target our root, which is our grid delta UL. We're going to find all of the feature card delta classes, so that's all of the LIs. And we're going to look for the nth child on these. Actually, I must have changed that. I think that the default is 2n. So 2n means every second one. Okay, 3n would be meaning every third one. That's a very simple way of looking at it. So the other way you can look at that is odd and even, where it's just 2n. So at the moment, so if we look at our first row, our media is on the right, and that's correct because that's where it's set in the DOM. If we look at our second one, the media is on the right, even though it's in the first element in the DOM. So if we want to change this, we could change that 2n to being odd, even, sorry. Would it be odd, even? Let's try it. Yeah, even. So every even number, so that's 1, 2. Yep, so it's even is the same as saying 2n. If we want to change the way this works, we can say odd. And now we've got the content and then the image, or we can go even, and we got the image and then the content. So it's simple little, rather than looking at 1n, 2n, so I think it's easier to just go odd or even if you just want alternating rows. Okay, so that's the choosing which LI, so which one of these feature card LIs we're going to, or which set, I should say, of these we're going to affect with this rule, is just choosing that. And then on that card, so each even card, so in this case it's the second one down, we're going to look for the direct children, so of anything, so whatever you put there, whether it's a div, a block, an image, or whatever you put there, if it is the last child, we're going to set the order to -1. So what we're saying is that on the second one, so on the even numbered one, so on the second one here, take the last child, which is the content, and set the position of that to, or the order of that, I should say, to -1, which means it's higher than the content one, which would be by definition of 0 if it's not been set to anything. So the content would be 0. That would be -1. Sorry, the media would be 0. Content would be -1, so the content moves to the left. And just that one line there is what tells these to alternate on each LI. Right, now you can see, because the media query, when we get to our mobile landscape, the query doesn't apply. So we no longer have the 12 columns. We no longer have the alternation of the ordering. So they're all the same. We got image, content, image, content. Okay, very simple. So that one little rule there is what is doing our alternation. All right, then we go to the actual feature card. Now on this feature card, on feature card delta, on the CSS there, again, we're setting it to a display of grid. And in this case, we're saying when the media is above 768, so above the mobile landscape again, we want to have 12 columns along that grid. This is just typical stuff, so don't worry about that. And what we're saying is that the first child, we want to span 7 of those columns. The second child, we want to span 5 of them. So if we look up here, so the first child is the media, and we're telling that to span 7 of those columns. The second child is the content, and we're telling it to span 5 of those columns. All right, so that's how that part works. Now let's say we decide we want the other way around. We want a smaller image and more content. You'd be kind of tempted to just change it on this class here. I'm not so keen on that idea, because I think that if you change it on this class, that means that you're changing it everywhere. And let's say there's one location where you decide to change it and you want it to be different, and then you edit this, and then you've wrecked everywhere else that you've applied this to. So I would say, for me, it makes sense to just leave the CSS alone for frames and create your own modifiers. So to do that, just copy this media query and then go up to the bricks class manager, class system, whatever, and start typing fr. We want to do the same thing, fr feature card. I think we're doing delta, are we? Yes, we are. So we've got card, feature card, delta. We're going to add a modifier, so 2 dashes, and I would say media. We want the media to be span 5. This is going to be a long name, but it'll just make sense. You can make this whatever you like. So I've got media span 5. And on that, press the enter key. That creates a new class. And on that custom CSS, we're going to paste that rule, that default rule that came with feature card alpha. And on that, we're going to get rid of this first bit because we don't need that. That's all we want to change is the spans. So what we're going to do is say on this one, we want that one to be 5 and we want that one to be 7. Okay. What we've done here, and the Bricks editor, by the way, since the last updates for optimizing the performance, it does these really weird things where when you make changes in your CSS, quite often your hints that you've got here are out of alignment with the actual content. So I'm just going to hit the save on that and just do an F5. You'll see it'll come right. Okay, so there we go. So it's right now. So we come back to this feature card alpha, feature card delta. That's got our media span on there. Go style, and there it is there. Oops. And there it is there. And again. Okay, so to make the second one the same, all we have to do is add that modifier. So if I do a dash media, there's my media span 5. And now both of these have the same settings. So the span of the media is 5 and of the content is 7. All right, so that now that we know that works, we can delete the second li, get rid of the li. We've styled this up exactly how we want it. We've got the card having the right media width and the content width, all ready to go. Now we just have to turn this li into a loop. So go to content and use it as a query loop, use posts, and maybe on the card heading, we'll put something in there so you can see that it is actually a loop. The title, maybe we'll update the content here to be the excerpt. And, oh no, make that the featured image. Why not? Where is our featured image? Is that featured image there? All right. Save on that. And there we go. We've got exactly what we were looking for. We've got some missing featured images here where we've got alternating from side to side on a query loop using a frame from frames or a template from frames. So let's go back now and say the only other difference we had in here, I think we had some alignment things here that you could set. Again, you can create modifiers rather than trying to modify the where are we? What's setting the alignment there? Let's have a look at what's setting that alignment. We've got some padding around it, and we have a line item center. Start. There we go. That aligns it to the top. So this on the feature card delta. Align items flex start. So let's go back to here. So it's on the feature card delta. It might be a ACSS rule for this. I'm going to check that actually. See if there's a utility for that. If we actually, we don't have to. We don't have to. What am I doing? Just go to the content and we're going to align items to the top, and that'll override it anyway because it's on the ID. Because we're only doing this one and then it's looped anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So we do that. Let's go to the UL. Make sure we get no classes selected because we only want to do this one UL. On our layout, we're going to grab a radius. Why not a radius? So medium radius. On our border. There's our radius. Why not put a border on there as well? A border of say 1 pixel. Solid. And I know we'll go with this color here. Layouts. Let's put some spacing on it. Okay, maybe use a space M. Okay, so spacing around there, and we'll set a background color. We'll just use a dull background color because we've got light text. So I'm just going to use the shade and maybe just use this color here. That might be a bit too much. Something that's not so obvious. Yeah, there you go. That'll do. All right. So what I'm showing here is we've just created a layout using a pre-built template, created a modifier to add to the feature card delta, which is our span 5. On that, all we've done is set our CSS here to override that rule to change the way the spans are working. So we get different size, image, and copy, and that's pretty much it. That's all we've had to do there, apart from just a bit of styling. So it's a really quick way of doing this. But if you start with something that's almost like what you want, then yeah, it's so much quicker to actually get this done. The thinking's already been done about how we're going to set this up so that it responds properly. If we make that responsive, we get to a point where it's all responsive there, gets to our mobile breakpoint, and none of those rules apply anymore. So it's all in one column. It's all been done for you. You don't have to think about it. I mean, knowing how it works is important, so you can change it, but you don't have to think about how to implement this if you start with something that already does it. That's my way of thinking. So I hope this makes sense. I hope it's something that is going to help you. If you don't agree with me, if I've said something in here you completely think I'm off the mark, I'd love to hear that as well, because I'm on a constant learning journey as well. So the more feedback we get, the better. Thank you.